Dave Yoho presides over one of the oldest and most successful consulting groups representing small business in the United States. He sits on the board of public companies and has made over 5,000 speeches in all 50 states and in 22 foreign countries. He received a gold record from RCA Victor, the Oscar of Professional Speaking from the National Speakers Association, and most recently was awarded the Masters of Influence Award. Previous recipients of this award were Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, Deepak Chopra, Art Linkletter, and Dr. Ken Blanchard, author of The 1 Minute Manager. Dave has appeared in over 100 training videos and movies for corporations, and was invited to the White House on 3 separate occasions, and has authored several books. Most importantly, Dave is one of us. He enlisted in the United States Maritime Service in mid-1944, completed basic, or what was then called boot camp, at Sheepshead Bay. He was assigned to his first ship, a newly designed T-2 tanker, which was destined to be sent to the South Pacific, where he spent 13 months. 4 days after World War II ended, he turned 17 years of age. Dave is proud of his Merchant Marine service and was pleased that he could join this 30th anniversary celebration. And now, Dave Yoho.
My title today of what we're going to interact with is called, Hell No, We Won't Go Away. Does that offend anyone? But let me hear you say it if it doesn't offend you. Hell no, we won't go away. Now, we're small in numbers, and we're getting smaller every day. And how long have we been using the 5,000 survivors of World War II? How long have we been using that number? About 3 years. Well, I guarantee you, and I'm not a gambler, I'm going to bet money there ain't 5,000 of us left. We are a going away breed, but our message does not have to go away, as you will hear in a minute. Now, I've taken some liberties with some of the information that is privileged to be on the press today, things you can hear about. I want to take a couple of just comment on some of the things that my research. I apologize to you. I didn't know much about your organization, really didn't know much about the people from my era who were doing the kind of things you people are doing, and for that I apologize. But here is some things. Here is some from a modern magazine. Once the war was over, what the bureaucrats in Washington did to the Merchant Marines was reprehensible. They treated them like second-class citizens and worse. Now, Congressman Hahn has asked you to get behind the movement and send this to somebody. A big piece of my message today is going to be recorded. You're going to get a video copy. Every chapter can get a video copy. You got to start telling our story. You've got to let people know. I didn't know you existed. Here, let me give you another thing. Here's the United States Merchant Marine provided the greatest sea lift in history. Now it goes on. Merchant ships face danger from submarines, mines, armed raiders, destroyers, aircraft, and kamikaze. Now, the kamikazes were first used in Okinawa, in the invasion of Okinawa, the first time they were used. And they were also used in Leyte Gulf. And now about 8,300 merchant mariners were killed, 1,200 wounded. 1,100 died from their wounds. 663 men were taken prisoner. Total kill estimated 9,300. Some were blown to death, some incinerated, some drowned, some frozen, some starved. 66 died in prison camps or aboard Japanese ships while being transported to a prison camp. Now, why am I telling you this? Because you may already know it. The reason I'm telling you this, we've got to remind some other people. I was fortunate enough to be at the opening ceremonies for the original World War II Museum, which is in Washington, D.C. I asked people today, what do you know about the Murmansk run? You think we were overpaid? You think that we were not entitled to veterans benefits? What can you tell me about the Murmansk run? Here's something, and you can get this on the internet, right? 41 convoys, Allied convoys, sailed to the Soviet ports of Murmansk and Archangel during World War II. Indeed, 20% of the cargo never got there, were lost. One convoy lost 24 out of 33 ships at a cost of 153 lives. It was so dangerous because of something called hypothermia. If you hit that water, you got about 4.5 minutes to live. They said it was so dangerous that strict orders were given that no merchant ship was allowed to stop, even to rescue sailors who fell overboard. These unfortunate men had to be left behind. Here's something. Here is one convoy, 33 merchant ships plus one oiler. Now, the oiler is still a merchant ship while they put it. I was on a T2 tanker. If you don't know what that is, it's a walking gas station, a floating gas station, refueling other ships. 33 merchant ships. A large battle fleet of British and U.S. Navy ships were guarding this convoy. The Allies, however, had hoped to lure the Germans into an uneven battle, and the British Admiralty mistakenly thought that the German battleship Tiflis, with firepower superior to all these British ships, and the battlecruiser Scheer were on their way to intercept this convoy. This convoy was abandoned. It was abandoned because they were told there was something more important. So then these ships were left to scatter. The merchant ships were thus abandoned to almost certain destruction and an icy death for their crews. I don't like things which say hero of World War II. They're the heroes. They're down there. They're our brothers who are down there. Only 11 of the 34 merchant ships reached port. Only 11. 24 were sunk, along with 153 mariners, 250,000 tons of war material, including 3,500 trucks, 200 aircraft, 435 tanks. Lifeboats brought some mariners to German-occupied Norway, where they were imprisoned and served the rest of their time in a German prison camp. Through the Murmansk run, the United States supplied the Soviet Union with 15,000 aircraft, 7,000 tanks, 35,000 tons of explosive, and 15,000 pairs of boots. We wanted to make sure our Soviet brothers had warm tootsies. And here's the thing about tankers. It's a picture. I don't know if you've ever seen this. It's common. It's in one of your magazines. I picked this one up. Here's the time. This is the kind of thing I served on. Torpedo cut this sucker in half. You can see this. I'll let it lay around for you. Cut the ship right in half. Now, figuring that the first half of the ship is going down, this ship isn't going to do a lot of damage anymore. You think that part of that ship's taken out. Not so. The men who could moved to the aft part of that ship and then were torpedoed again. One guy was blown overboard. The rest of his crew abandoned ship. One guy that was blown overboard became the only survivor of that massacre. One guy. And he was put aboard a submarine where he, in turn, served the rest of his time in a Japanese prison camp. I'm going to comment on this again in a few minutes. And you know how we were rewarded. $1 per day. There's a case study of a guy that was in one for over 3 years. Now imagine coming out after 3 years and you're going to get $1 a day. Yes, this guy got a brilliant check for about $1,100 for 3 years of his life. He came home, he was disfigured, beaten. The Japanese were brutal. If the Germans were bad, the Japanese were absolutely downright brutal people. And we lost a lot of people. And a lot of American sailors and Marines were lost in this melange. And here's a guy who goes to prison and is tortured. He comes home disfigured. But there is no hospitalization, as you and I well know. Let me get into the heart of what I'm here to talk about today. You honor me today by asking me to speak to you. And I admire what this organization has done and what you continue to do. You bring veterans together. This is a gift of God that we can all be here at our age. And I'm personally indebted to you for bringing out our stories to the degree you have brought them out, doing what you've done for us and our fellow merchant mariners. Now, I do have to tell you that I thought a little bit about what I should call my speech today. And remember, what is my speech called? Hell no, we won't go away. And if you saw, and I approved the caricature that went out that our promo department had of this little old veteran walking. That's the way people see us. Well, we don't want to be seen that way. We need a clarion call, a call. We need a clarion call to enlighten others. We need to plant seeds of information to replace misinformation, and yet harbor no malice towards those who do not know, or those who take actions to impede the actions that might be beneficial to us because they do not know. And realizing that they do not know is impossible. You cannot know what you do not know. Here's a story from my perception. This is not about me. It's about us. It's about you. But I have to tell it from the only thing I know. I was born in August 1928. A few months, I'm going to be 88 years of age. Hey, the good Lord had a principle of why he was going to keep me around this long. 1929, the stock market went beep, beep. They called it Black Friday. Bad time to be around. We entered the worst depression that this country has ever experienced or may ever experience anywhere. 1933, the banks closed. People lost their homes, all their savings. And World War II began in the early 30s before all this had happened. So we were growing up in an area where we were headed for World War II. In 1938, President Roosevelt established what we call the United States Maritime Service, which gave birth to this flag as well, this Merchant Marine flag. Now, he established this because he believed that we would be drawn into a war and that we would need ships to carry the goods and troops to foreign ports throughout the world. The Maritime Service would be the training ground. I was at that time 10 years old, 1938. President Kennedy, the late President Kennedy's father, was the administrator of the U.S. Maritime Service. He later was sent to the Court of St. James in England. But President Roosevelt's ideas worked. We are the results of that. They gave us the goods, and we delivered. U.S. Maritime Service eventually recruited 250,000 men, mostly teenagers. Many of their early recruits came from the Civilian Conservation Corps. Ask your children, ask your nieces, nephews. Who knows the Civilian Conservation Corps, or what it was brought for, or what it meant? These were young men in our country who had little to do and little place to put their efforts, and they were paid $17 a month. And they kept 4, and the 13 were sent home to their family. That's the condition under which you went to the Civilian Conservation Corps. Most of which their families benefited from. And these guys, the CCCs, as they were called, dressed in a kind of chambray or sometimes chinos, or what we call those things today, khakis. They repaired roads, bridges, federal and municipal buildings, did maintenance on the many waterways in the U.S., and sadly, their history is so little known. My lovely wife's father was a member of the Civilian Conservation Corps. They were the original recruits in 1938. That's where the Maritime Service started, with taking them from $17 a month. They were probably now going to get 25. A raise. Why not? Move on. Now comes the date of December 7th, 1941. The Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor. The U.S. declares war on Japan, and a few days later, Italy and Germany declared war on us. Incidentally, we never declared war on Germany. Hitler declared war on us because of a pact. It was called a Russian-Sino Pact, and they had this pact, and because of that, we declared that a state of war existed after they declared war on us. In that turbulent period, the U.S. Maritime began training thousands to become merchant mariners. We were trained in military camps. Once you walked in the gate, you couldn't get out again. Merchant mariners were provided uniforms that emulated the Navy and the Coast Guard. We were structured under U.S. Navy regulations mandated and managed by the U.S. Coast Guard. Don't let Congress forget it. They're the ones that told us that we were going to be veterans. They're the ones that told us and taught us about military involvement. Don't let them ever forget it. Hell no. We won't go away. Their recruiting stations, and there were 3 main boot camps in the United States for the Maritime Service, 2 on the East Coast, 1 in Florida, 1 in New York at a place called Sheepshead Bay. And then there was 1 on the West Coast, and I'm not sure where it was. I believe it was close to San Pedro. And then we had the wonderful, wonderful concept of officer training. How many of you came from that officer training system? That just a marvelous officer training, so little known. We were the only people in the world that before our officers became officers, they were cadets and they were put on our ships to function our ships before they ever graduated. When this war started, I was 13 years old. I lived in the inner city of Philadelphia. And I had no idea where Pearl Harbor was or what our Navy was doing there. And I tell you, where I live, most people didn't know where Pearl Harbor was either. The die was already cast. And here's the tragic part. German U-boats were already stationed off our coast. They sat off the east coast of the United States, 4 to 5 miles off that coast. Ships that traversed that long sea lane were sunk mercilessly by German U-boats. They had developed the technique of standing miles offshore, and then our cities were still well lit. When the ships came down, they became a silhouette for what was about to happen. The lights of these cities created those silhouettes. The Germans sank our ships. The majority of ships sunk were merchant ships. In the beginning of World War II, these ships were unarmed, and the convoy was not developed until 1943. The truth of this carnage didn't reach the American people, and there are a lot of reasons not. The government did not want the American people to know how vulnerable our coastlines were or how badly the war was going, and all of that occurred right off the coast of some of the most populated cities in the United States. How come? This is not part of the educated material that our children receive in school. How come? It isn't part of the material that our congressmen who are educated, unfortunately, most of them are lawyers, but unfortunately, they do not know about this. We were already at risk just getting on a ship that left an East Coast port. But how come those who teach our children or those who write our history do not know this? 1944, I was 15 years of age. I'd skipped 2 grades in the school system, and I was a junior in high school. Now, because of this age difference, most of my friends were 2 or 3 years older than I was, and most of us were emotionally participating in the fervor of American patriotism. My closest friends were going to war. I wanted to go too. So on a falsified birth certificate, I attempted to enlist in the Navy. I completed the physical. I did all the date and the paperwork, and I waited for them to get back to me, and then they found out. They found out of what I call my duplicity, and they told me that they were not going to accept my enlistment. Now, not too far from the U.S. Naval Recruiting Station was a U.S. Maritime Recruiting Station. Now, I'm not saying that they were great salespeople, but they all dressed the same as the people in the U.S. Navy Recruiting Station. The enlisted men were whites, white caps, no insignia on the arm unless they had rank. The officers dressed in blue with gold braid. So I reapplied. This time a little smarter, I got my friend to help me put together a birth certificate, and I made it. See, I was born again in 1928. So in March, April, May, I don't even remember the month anymore. Here I was, a 15-year-old kid applying to play adult. All right. Eventually, I was sworn in after a physical and other data. And I lived in Philadelphia, so I went down on a given day to the Philadelphia train station, the main terminal, got on a train with other recruits, took us to New York City, got off the train. They put us on a bus to take us to some place called Sheepshead Bay, the U.S. Maritime Service Training Camp, which was adjacent to the U.S. Coast Guard training camp in a place in New York area. All right. They had gates on this. We walked in civilian clothes and they closed the gates. 2 hours later, we were showered and we had uniforms on, took an oath, and we were a part of the U.S. Maritime Service. Now, I do have to tell you, in all honesty, they did me one big favor. I had a lot of problems in school. But this is a thing that happened that totally influenced a young and very wayward teenager. And I am grateful forever for that experience. That was 72 years ago. This is about 1 year ago. I have a big office. We got all kinds of computers in there. We have computers at home. And my wife, my lovely wife, Carol here, also serves as taking off my personal. See, I sound like I know all these things. They said, you take email? Oh, yes. Are you on YouTube? Yes, we're on YouTube. Are you on Facebook? Yes, Facebook, LinkedIn, Stinktin, Pinktin, and Quinktin. Winked and tweeted and twattered. But I don't know how any of those things work. So my wife says offhandedly, what do you know about a place called Sheepshead Bay? I said, that's where I did basic training, what they used to call boot camp. She said, they're republishing a magazine. This magazine was originally printed, I'm going to say mid-1944, and it became a recruiting magazine. And what it is, here's an exact replica of what appeared. This is what appeared on the screen. Now, on the screen, it was a lot smaller. When I saw this on the screen, I had never seen this magazine before. I said to my wife, that's me, right there. That's me in that picture. Well, how did this come to be? So anyhow, we put in information. It was someplace in Dallas, Fort Worth, and it was one of your chapters. It was reproducing this magazine. We cut a check, we sent it, and we were leaving on a cruise. We get back from Europe, the magazine is there. That is me in 19, and so I called him back and I said, give me about 30 copies. I want to get it to my family, other people that I interact with, but that is me. Now I want to tell you about this event. My wife found it. My wife, Carol, found it. I called the Dallas Fort Worth chapter. There's a woman by the name of Barbara, who is the wife of the president there. His name is D'Agostino. And I spoke to her. And I said to her, that's me. She said, are you sure that's you? I says, a mama seal, no, the little baby seals. That is me. So I sent it to my family. And of course, my sisters being alive, they said, yeah, that's him. So now I said, well, how do I get more? I want to buy a quantity of these. You have to talk to. And then I got Sandy Moran, another woman, and very, very helpful to me. She's in the Dallas Fort Worth chapter. Next thing, I call her and tell her how many I want. And she asked me who I was. And she said, you have to call the National. I said, you sound like an order. I used to get these in grade school. That's why I got thrown out of grade school for not listening to what people tell me. Why do I have to? She said, because they want to hear your story. So I called and got in touch with this lovely lady. Our first conversation, I told you my name was Yoho, and it was in World War II. You said to me, which side? It sounds Japanese. No, she didn't. No, she didn't say that. That's a bit of my jerking around. I said, well, tell me, I had never heard of your organization. Tell me about your organization. So she told me. And through this interaction, I get emails from some of the Patty Scafidi. I never met her until yesterday. They tell me about her. Then I meet Sheila Sawa. Have you met her? If you haven't, stand up a second. I have to tell you, this is a celebrity in your midst, and I'm going to tell you why. She defends our honor. She defends our history. Her father was a World War II veteran who passed away probably less than a year ago. And she not only defends our interests, but she attacks anybody who is so dumb to attack what we think, we feel, or we believe in. And God bless her for doing so, and God help them for understanding. Because what I have just said to you now has to lead you to think about what you can do. Here is a fact. The woman who set your bill in purpose, you think it's the first time anybody tried to do it? Do you think this Congresswoman, Han, you think she was saying, oh, this is a wonderful thing. I'll get a lot of support and there'll be a lot of money behind it. Nothing. There's nothing you get except what we call psychic, beautiful remuneration, being paid for doing what you're doing. Oh, another woman. I attended the World War II memorial the day it opened. And so we traversed this place and we found out that the World War II memorial didn't come about because of Congress or the Senate or our lawmakers. It came about because of one woman whose name is Marcy Kaptur, Kaptur, a congresswoman who lived in Toledo, Ohio, who put together with Senator Bob Dole, put those things together and brought us the prominence that it gave us there. And here's what I noticed today. When you walk in, how many of you have been to the World War II Memorial in Washington? Go, 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 please. It's a date with history. It's a date with your heart. It's a date with our memories. It's a beautiful place. But now they have the Marine Corps Band, which is really a great band, and they play this theme of all the things that U.S. Navy. Anchors away. There is no heave-ho there because they don't know the words. They don't know the significance of the music. And so the head of the maritime service, whoever he was at the day, he was there for the opening, and I went and spoke to him. I went up and spoke to him, and this is what I said. Are you aware of the theme song for the U.S. Merchant Marine? He said they played it. Now, I said, the thing that you believe they played was the U.S. Coast Guard. That's a different thing. Find out about our music. Not because, I admit that I'm remiss also. I couldn't sing those words for you. And that's what our mistake is. That's why we are so little known. We didn't insist that it be put in there. If you want me to be there, just acknowledge my presence and get an understanding of where we are. Well, let me be clear. See, some people will say this is a coincidence, the way I met you and the way I came to be. Millions of pictures on the internet, thousands and millions of graphs and charts, hundreds of millions of words. Now, how does that reach me, who I never had any contact with you? Some people will say a coincidence. No such thing as a coincidence. A coincidence is God's way of remaining anonymous. Now, I have a favorite Latin expression. It's called vocatus sive non vocatis Deus adorit. And it means that God will be present, whether invited or not. And so through this miracle, I am here with you today. Now, let's move forward a little bit. I want to talk about the war by telling you about what preceded the war. The years preceding December 7th, 1941, were difficult for all of us. For your generation, or for your parents, or your grandparents' generation. We were coming from an era of scarcity. 27% of the people in the United States were unemployed. There were only 130 million people in the United States at the time, and we put 16 million of them in uniform. 250,000 of them were U.S. Maritime Service people. People. We were people. We were blood. We were sinew. We were bone. We were thinking human beings. Now, many of you, like myself, came from a generation of parents who could not eat in restaurants. We didn't own a car. My family never owned a home, never owned a car. They didn't have a television, of course. But there was something about this ideal of being loyal to the United States and what it stood for. The generation prior to 1941 didn't do a lot of the things that people today take for granted. My mother never traveled 40 miles from the place she was born and died at 43. What a short span of interaction with other people. The breadwinner in the household was often the man, sometimes having two jobs just to make ends meet. My father was unemployed for 2 years. Now, this all set the pace for what we did because scarcity meant a limited amount of formal education for many people. I told you I was a junior in high school when I enlisted. Dumb! I enlisted and went away. But then in my day and age, a lot of people didn't have high school educations. Few ever made it to college. And there were few opportunities for leisure activities. Vacations were possible only with ingenious parents who found a way to visit a relative or spend a few days in a park or the seashore. Now, are you getting the message here? This is where we came from. This is where our generation came from. This is where the generations who preceded us came from. World War II created the greatest avalanche of enlistment that our military services had ever experienced. 16 million men and women in uniform, 250,000 of them U.S. Maritime Service. We fought on 5 continents. 5 continents. Our country lost 480,000 lives at the time the war ended. Nothing saying about what happened to people who were hospitalized at the time and died later. 480,000. Second largest fatality above the Civil War, which was 620,000. So why is this important? Americans took pride in their families, their country, their flag, and we, as merchant mariners, swore to honor that which we promised to do in the oath we took. This is all too easy to say this. We suffered the highest casualties of any of the services. How many people do you think know that? 1 out of 26. Over 9,000 direct casualties as an aftermath of World War II. Over 1,600 ships were sunk or disabled. We don't wear these statistics as a proud label. Many of those who made the final sacrifice were on ships which were poorly armed or not armed at all. In the early days of World War II, there was no armed guard, as I mentioned. There was no convoy. And I ponder the reasoning of our lawmakers. Were we veterans of World War II? Were our sacrifices worthy of recognition? So then, why is it so difficult to get them to hear and understand our story? You have the numbers more than you will realize, as I will tell you in a minute. But remember, when you tell people our story, for those who are misinformed, the majority of food to supply our troops and frequently those of our allies, the equipment to transport our armies, the parts to repair vehicles, the fuel to make them go, the plane parts, and the fuel for these planes came on a ship, the majority of which were manned by people like us. Were we veterans of that great war, or a group of men who served our country who will utilize our efforts and then forget? Well, only the future will determine that. Somehow the rumor grew that we were paid 2 or 3 times what those in the military were paid for the same kind of duty. For those of us who know the truth and understand that that is misinformation. It is propagated by those who do not know and do not know that they do not know and do not care that they do not know that they do not know. God bless them. for those, because ignorance becomes reality for those who do not seek that which is beyond their own perception. I'm not calling our lawmakers ignorant by defaming them or disgracing them. I'm telling you that you cannot know what you don't know. And because they don't know, I attribute that to us. We didn't use our manpower. We didn't use our weapon at the time. Now they tell me about this compensation system, right? 20 to 25% more. Are you aware that if you volunteered in the U.S. Navy and you were on a submarine, you were paid 50 to 75% more than other people on regular military ships? Why? Same reason we were paid, risk and reward. Send a bunch of doofus kids out on a ship that has no armament, you got to be out of your mind. The German submarines off our coast, and the guys, I want to be there. I want to be. Yeah, you don't. And that's why they say, a young guy does not know. We did not know. We were on, I was an amateur boxer. I fought 53 bouts as an amateur boxer. I was not afraid of it. But here's what you do when you're young. You believe that you were invulnerable. Anybody in their right mind that would volunteer to go on ships, and you recognize that a freighter sometimes went 6 knots. The Liberty ship, 9 to 11 knots, max. The ship I was on, 18 to 20 knots. And we said, we'll go. The Merchant Marine pay system was regulated by that thing we call risk and reward. But here's the major difference. If our ships were sunk or put out of commission, when you left your ship, your pay stopped. How many people you think know that? Those unfortunate enough to be captured by the enemy and held in prison camps were tortured the same as any other prisoner and received $1 a day for their incarceration. $1 a day for their incarceration. When they returned home, the medical bills for injuries suffered were their personal responsibility. Remember, when you got off your ship, in whatever form, your pay stopped and you weren't coming back. And there were bonuses. Oh, yes, let's not forget the bonuses we were paid. If your ship was torpedoed or sunk, you received the bonus. Tell that to the guys on this tanker who got a bonus. One person survived. The average crew on a tanker like this was between 42 and 50 members, maritime, not including the Coast Guard, not including the Armed Guard, which may have been another 25 to 26. And they all went down. Yes, we got bonuses. And you got a bonus when you were in a military zone. Now, here's the interesting thing. If you were in a military zone, and you look today, if you can go back and check your record, they measure how long you were in the military zone. They forgot to tell you that when your ship was leaving New York Harbor and going to Venezuela to pick up crude oil, you were in a combat zone. They forgot to tell you that. To tell you that those ships were sunk or put out of commission in zones that everybody else in the United States can say today, you were safe, you were non-combatant, you were civilians. Well, tell that to the family of those who are gutsy enough to be at Murmansk. It is critical that lawmakers, and I pause here to reflect on this, it is critical that they know and understand and acknowledge we did what we were asked to do. We served in the manner we were asked to serve, and in many ways, some merchant mariners were no different than those in the soldiers and sailors who never got into a combat zone. Some people never did that. But 1 out of 26 of us died. 1 out of 26 of us died. 663 in prison camps. All right. In my circle of friends, I was the only one and one other guy who got into a combat zone. That doesn't degrade anything they did. Everybody who served had a purpose, including the women. You go to the World War II Memorial, they pay homage to women who were really the buttress at home. My first ship was a T2 tanker. I mentioned it before, a pretty modern ship at the time. That ship could do 18 knots even when it was full. It was called a T2. Remember, and for those of you who served, you already know this, the merchant ship that got all the attention was the Liberty ship, and it was a damn tough ship to be aboard. How many of you served on Liberty ships? My God, they were great. And we even went on the one that they have in San Francisco Harbor, and we went aboard that. And I said to my wife, "Look at this thing. It was full of cargo and have a crew on here. It can't do more than 9 knots. If you were in a convoy and you got too slow to stay with a convoy, you just got abandoned." Ah! Well, so anyhow, I'm on this fantasy. I never once perceived the danger in what I was about to do. I did not have a clue. I never once evaluated or asked for an explanation about what happens in the bowels of a ship. I, like many of my contemporaries, didn't know what to ask. We didn't think about what we were about to do. And for many of us, it was a duty and a service to our country. Issues such as benefits, post-war hospitalization, are most of what we now today call injustice, simply never entered the minds of many of us. Call us naive, call us foolish, call us ignorant. We were all of whatever you call a teenage kid. And the way you think about your children at 15, 16, 17, and 18, we were no different. My ship left New York Harbor and did something called a shakedown. Shakedown means they take it a short trip to make sure everything's in working order. We went to Halifax, Nova Scotia, came back to the New York shipyard. And then we moved to another shipyard where we got our full armament. We took on additional decking. It's called spar decking. When you're a tanker, which is low in the water, they have a spar deck built above it, very, very strong. It supports airplanes, jeeps, and all kinds of stuff that we're taking over. And when this ship was loaded, it sat low in the water. So you can imagine a ship that would be 30 feet high out of the water, when it loaded with fuel, you could almost look over the side and touch the water. And I was proud to think that I was on the engine shaft of that ship, on the engine staff. We left the shipyard, picked up crude oil in Venezuela. The ship then dropped that crude oil off in a place called Curacao in the Netherlands, West Indies. And it was replaced by something called Bunker C, which is a fuel that they used on other ships. And so we were the gas station for those other ships. In exchange for all of that, we left Curacao and went through the Panama Canal. I went through that canal the first time. I was probably all of 16 years of age. And I have to tell you, what a significant and emotional experience for a 16-year-old kid who had never been out of Philadelphia to go through the Panama Canal. But now we're in the Pacific Ocean, and the waters are calmer in the Pacific. Not knowing where we're going, we did have that armament. We had a fairly good-sized gun called a 3-inch 50 on the fore part of the ship, 5-inch 38 on the back. We had 8 anti-aircraft guns, and I think they were 20 caliber bullets they find. That's what the armed guard. And the thing they don't tell you, everybody on that ship had what we call a backup position. If the guy assigned, the armed guard guy, couldn't make that shot in the general quarters, you had to replace that guy. So we had all of this. About the 3rd or 4th day into the Pacific Ocean, I was in the engine room. My title was fireman water tender. And I have to tell you, I had a hard time being a fireman water tender, even graduating from Sheepshead Bay. I had to be demoted. Embarrassing for me to tell you, for a period of time, I had to serve as something called a wiper. I didn't have a good feel for how to keep water in those boilers, and that gets the captain and the other people a little upset. But at this time, I was a fireman water tender. And I am down in the bowels of the ship. Now, on these ships, for those that have never gone to sea, there are things called cowls, C-O-W-Ls, and they're big trumpet-like things that stick up in the air. They catch the air when you're going full ahead. And I was down in that engine room, and they tried out all the gunnery, all the shots and all the guns went off. I was on watch when that occurred. And what happened, the sound radiated in that engine room as if they had magic speakers all over. And here I was in that engine room, 35 to 40 feet below the water line. I asked the oiler or the engineer, I forget, whoever was on duty with me at the time. And incidentally, they were the older guys. They were all of probably 22 to 24 years of age. That was the older guys. And I said to them, so if we get hit, how do we abandon ship? What route? Now, I asked myself today, why didn't I ask that in the beginning? Why didn't I ever think about that? Why? You say, did they tell you? No, they don't tell you. They don't answer questions you don't ask. I never knew about that. So the answer came back to me, and here's what they said. Kid, if this ship is hit, you're not going to leave the engine room. And that didn't mean I was going to serve another watch. I got the message pretty clearly at that time. Now, I considered myself a tough dude. I not only fought in the boxing team in Sheepshead Bay, I fought in every port where they would have competitive boxing. And I grew up in the inner city, so unfortunately, I had my share of street fights, more than I would like to admit. But at that point, hearing that message, I was a scared 16-year-old kid trying to play an adult. I hold no animosity for the things that we merchant mariners did not receive. I hold no animosity at all. I hold no animosity for the bureaucrats who waited until 43 years after the war ended to give us a limited GI Bill. This is kind of nuts. I was 60. Some of you were older when they gave us the GI Bill. Hooray! I can now go to college on the GI Bill. I had already gone to college and I had paid for it myself and I went at night. Oh, I can buy a house with a GI mortgage. I was on my 5th house by then. I was 60 years old. But somewhere in the hearts and the minds of bureaucrats, that's it. You got it. No, that ain't it. And that ain't the way it works. And that war memorial you visit in Washington, D.C. cost $197 million to build. Not one penny of that came from the United States government. I love my country. I'm an 88-year-old guy who says, you got nothing to give me, baby. I took what I wanted from this society. It made me a man who could go to school and get an education and rise in the world of business. All of that was made possible. But don't deny this. That money was raised, again, because of a woman, a congresswoman from Toledo, Ohio, and Senator Bob Dole. $197 million came from subscription. So this tells you, what could we be doing? All right? I hope it doesn't sound cynical. Again, I never thought of it. I was on that ship for 13 months. Like you, doing what I was asked to do. We shuttled back and forth from island to island in Saipan, Tenia, Eureka, Ulithi, and Oitok, where they finally tested the atom bomb after the war. I was in all those places and then back to the canal for rearmament or repairs or what have you, and then right back to the South Pacific. Now, I have to tell you about the day the war ended. I don't know where you were. I was in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And when that war ended, my ship was nowhere where you could have radio contact, except once the war was over, they called us. So now the purser and the first mate they get all the people who were on deck and took us into the mess hall, and they told us the war had ended. They told us about the test at Los Alamos, where they dropped this, they exploded a hole in the ground a mile wide and 2.5 miles deep, whatever it was. They told us about Hiroshima, taking a whole city out, 550,000 people taken out with one bomb. They told us about Nagasaki, which was the second city 3 days later. They told us all about this. We're in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and you know what we said? I don't believe this. Here's what I said. We're kids. You're going to believe what people tell you? We wouldn't be there if people had told us all the things we were going to face. No. And in my case, our hopes of coming home was immediately dashed because we had a boatload of oil and they took us back through the canal and sent us to England. Now, where does that leave me today? Let me fast forward. The war ended. We were living in a time we would call abundance. We were about to enter the greatest era of abundance that this country has ever known. We came home, and remember what I said, 16 million in uniform, and a high percentage were coming home at one time. Now, despite the fact of the matter that we learned the hard way that we weren't covered by the job, at least I learned the hard way when I wanted to go for hospitalization, for disease or extended injuries, both physical and emotional. created by and during this time of service. And I want this message to be clear. I want every congressman, every senator to hear this, hear it, and understand what whoever of us are living went through. I had malaria. Didn't have a clue of what it was. When we were what island we picked it up, I can't tell you. They fed me atabrine and something called quinine. And when I come home, I still had it. And the first time I went for medical attention, they told me that I wasn't covered. I had to go to my own hospital or my own doctor and pay my own doctor bills and buy my own quinine. All right, we weren't covered by the bills for this diseases. I had malaria. Incidentally, in the bowels of a ship, the pipes are covered with asbestos. And you know about the hazards of asbestos today. We were never told about that. I ended up with something called asbestosis, which is a disease from asbestos. Now, I don't look like I'm having a problem, and essentially I'm not, because they don't find out about this until 30 or 40 years later, and mine are plated. What I have in my system is plated, meaning it is covered by sinew, by tissue, and so it doesn't affect me. Now, I ponder about a couple of things. I was treated for ulcers from the time I came home till I was almost 60 years of age, treated for ulcers. And they say ulcers came to people who are wealthy. Well, that may be true today, but I wasn't wealthy when I was 17 years of age, and I had ulcers. And so they treated me, and for years I paid all my hospital expenses, only to find out when I was just past my 60th birthday that I have something called H. pylori. H. pylori is what the disease I had that they thought was ulcers. H. pylori came from drinking water in a third world country before my 18th birthday. Neither the Maritime Service, the Merchant Marine, nor the United States government is responsible for not knowing in advance what would happen to us if we participated in the world. It is, however, disingenuous to disavow any of what I'm telling you right now because it all happened. So why is it so difficult to understand? We joined the Maritime Service to do what was right. We went away to serve our country. We went because we were young, naive, foolish, or patriotic. Blame anything you want. I hold no rancor with those who make the laws, teach our children, teach our history, form the history of our country, and tell others about it because they are misinformed. I hold no rancor. Yet I weep as I approach you this day for those who gave so much and are so little recognized. So I do want you to know that even the Korean veteran and the Vietnam veteran sitting here, somebody had the audacity to call that a police action. Where that came from, I can't tell you. I love my country. I don't like the government. I don't like the government because it's people, and people who do not know telling us what we can do. And so those that judge us may never understand because they do not know and they cannot perceive that which they do not know. Now, do they, can they, will they ever comprehend what we gave up? And I'm coming to wrap up now. We gave up something that you can't buy. You can't ever get it again. We gave up our youth. We gave up being 16, 17, 18, 19. There were no school proms for us, no graduation ceremonies, no visits to the mall shop, no getting your first car, teenager, none of the things that other people would someday discuss. Did you ever feel left out of the conversation? Those are things we consciously or unconsciously agreed to abandon when we took an oath and we did what we were asked to do. And just a personal note, my 16th or 17th year, never had a birthday at home, never celebrated a holiday. It was on a ship, Christmas, New Year's, Thanksgiving. They celebrated in some ways. All right. Had a minimal understanding of what we do. Now the laws are created again. But we can feel blessed because we did come back, while 1 out of 26 of our comrades did not. Our ranks are rapidly diminishing. Many of us have comrades living in nursing homes or with relatives. Many exist on Social Security or some pension from post-war jobs. And so I want to cap this off by saying you can do something about that. You have the power to do something about that. Now, whatever we do and whatever we agree to do in our lives, just remember this. We do have support. It is minor in its nature. But what we choose to do, however we choose to do it, and only in America. My father was Jewish. My mother was a Gentile. So technically, I'm not Jewish, but I got a Jewish heritage. That's what makes me smarter than most of my friends. I didn't want to bring that up, but I think that. My children all practice, and I practice the Christian faith. So I'll tell you what happened to me in my relationship with God. He put 12 guys in charge. There were only 12 of them, remember, and one leader. All of them were broke. None of them had any money. They had no connection. They had no way. They had no YouTube. They had no email. They don't have an iPhone. No way to contact other people. But they grew into the largest movement that has ever existed, and nothing comparable has ever happened since. We have got to get this message to people, and part of why I put this together is to give you parts and pieces. We're going to chop this up so you can go back to your chapter and say, here, 4 to 6 minutes, just watch this. Now, let me tell you how it works. I'm on YouTube right now. I have a thing on YouTube that I never even saw it when it was put up, and it's called The Correct Language to Use When Trying to Sell. And when that went on, I had no idea it went on, almost 200,000 people. 200,000 people have viewed that. When is our message hit the multitude? When is our message going to get out? Do you have the way to do it? Not only through every one of your chapters, but through the people you know. Now, part of my advanced study is in human behavior. I was fortunate enough to have good schooling after I come home from school because I always had a good job where I could afford to do what I wanted to do after I got out of school. And I thank the Lord for whatever graces he has given me to be able to do what I do. I ran a company that did $60 million when I sold my interest in it in 1974. That's equivalent about doing $300 million today. Inner city, merchant marine, proud of everything. Government didn't do it for me. Government didn't lend me any money. The government did zilch for me. That doesn't mean that they won't. We have to get them to hear the message you're saying, isn't it too late? No, it's never too late. What can I do? Every human being has an association of friends, relatives, people you interact with. Average person has about 250 people in their area of association. Friends, neighbors, people you work with, remote sometimes. But every one of those people have 250 people. You have the opportunity to tell the message. I hope I don't offend you. You got to get off your duff and do something about it. I don't thumb my nose at the government. But I don't know. We get invited to all kinds of political things. Hell, when I was poor, I say, where were they when I was poor? I would have liked a loaf of bread. Now everybody wants to treat me like a celebrity when I don't need it. What do they want? They send me gifts. So where were you from my family? We lived in a house where the rent was $12 a month when my father could afford to pay it. Nobody came then. I don't need you now. We need you. We need you. And we need you to tell this story, and we need your story to be told to other people. Now, I made no bones about it. I was not even familiar with your organization. When I heard about your organization and spoke to Cindy and finding out what you do and how you do it and how limited you do, I am moved. And to say that I am a participant in what you're going to go through next is just minimal. But we have the power. And some of you young people, I look out here, obviously, we spoke this morning, you're from the Vietnam era. We have to get something together that gets them moving forward. You have to get people into membership. You think anybody's going to be saddened by missing this? Yeah, show them what they missed. Now, everybody can't come. Those of you who come and those of you who need assistance to get here, you're a badge, you're a symbol. You've got to tell your story. The story has to be told because it is our story. Our pain has to be told. And if it is told in such a way that it gives that person a feeling, then we have served our purpose. You could not help but be moved. If you listen to the words, the Star Spangled Banner, God bless America. our own theme song, give us the goods and we'll deliver. We didn't do anything about it when it wasn't there. We spoke, but we did nothing about it. Now you're going to get the opportunity to do something about it today. And you can make a commitment today, and I'm going to sound like the preacher here or the rabbi asking for money. I'm not asking you for anything, but there's nothing you can do for me. I'm going to tell you what you can do for yourself. See, you committed yourself the day you joined the U.S. Maritime Service or the U.S. Merchant Marine. You did your slot, you did your pace, you did what you were supposed to do. Now is your fertile opportunity to make sure that you are casting forward for those that come after us, for your own families. I trust, because I heard you speak over the phone and you moved me, Papa. And I'm older than him. And you moved me because you're so young. How old are you? 44. I got underwear older than that. And I want to tell you, we put our trust and faith in the right people, and I want you to give them the applause for what just happened here today. Now, I want to do one other thing with you. In your book, I give you this. There's nothing more inspiring than the words of our history. And what I gave you here was written by Theodore Roosevelt, and it talked about you. And this is what it says. It is not the critic who counts, nor the man who points out how the strong man stumbled, or where the doer of deeds could have done better. The credit belongs to the man who was actually in the arena, whose face was marred by dust, sweat, blood, who strived valiantly, who erred and came short, sometimes again and again. But he who knows the great enthusiasm, the great devotion, and expends himself in a worthy cause, and who, at the worst, if he fails, at least fails, while daring so greatly that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who know neither victory or defeat. Share that with somebody. Thank you for coming to hear me today, and thank you guys for inviting me. My sister said, they said, how did you, well, first of all, I don't eat red meat. I don't eat fried foods, seldom eat desserts. I don't overindulge. I work out almost every day, 5 days a week, have a gym in my home. Here's what my sister said. If no one killed my brother before he was 18 years of age, he's going to live to 125. I'm going to be there because hell no, we won't go away. Hell no, we won't go away. God bless you. God bless you.